Hi guys, it's Debbie. Today I would like to speak about Shameless. Shameless is an American drama comedy TV series which aired for the first time in 2011. It mainly speaks about a large dysfunctional family, the Gallaghers, which live in Chicago. The series is actually based on a British TV series of the same name set in Manchester with the same characters, and also the plot is extremely similar. I've never actually seen the British version, I've only seen the American remake, so that's what I'll be talking about today. So as I said before, Shameless speaks of this very large family, the life of its family members, their interactions, their friendships, their feelings, and so on. So the show doesn't focus on an extremely dynamic plot and prefers to focus on the nature of every single character, creating the plot through a web of actions and decisions that every family member makes. The plot is then enriched by a series of secondary characters which all develop from the Gallaghers' love stories, jobs, criminal activities, friendships, and so on. So as you can tell, there is a vast and deep web of interactions between all the characters, making the plot interesting and engaging, but not through a complicated storyline, but through the affection we start to feel for the various characters as the series moves on. Because if we take the background story in an abstract form and we observe it just as it is without the characters, it's just day after day of work, school, criminal activity, drinking, partying, sex, and so on. It's not too deep if seen in an abstract way, but the series becomes interesting and really engaging thanks to these characters, which we observe in a sort of Truman Show style. So we watch them throughout every single moment of their day, including the most intimate moments. Is Shameless a simple show? I've often considered this because of its background, but I've come to the conclusion that it actually isn't, because the analysis of the characters is extremely deep, and with the passing of time we become very attached to them. Also, the series might appear simple, but it actually often asks and leaves unanswered certain questions about difficult life choices, and I appreciate the fact that these questions are left unanswered, as nobody will actually be there to guide us in life, to give us the answer to a specific doubt in life. There's never a guiding hand when we come to a crossroad. So it is a really interesting product. I personally really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who is searching for a different TV series than the ones that we are usually offered, because it is fun, entertaining, but also gives us a lot of material to think about, because we often judge what the characters do in the series, but then start to realise what would we have done in that certain situation, what would our reaction have been. So let's take a look at these main characters, which are the fundamental element of the show. The Gallagher family is composed of Frank Gallagher, a drug addict and alcoholic, which spends most of his time drinking at a local bar, the Alibi, begging for money or doing a series of odd and often illegal jobs in order to make ends meet. He has an extremely large family, but he doesn't seem to show any affection towards his children. On the contrary, he often exploits them in order to obtain welfare aid. If they try to fight back against him and his abusive manners, he often accuses them of not being grateful for providing a roof above their head, which in reality is just a derelict house with countless issues. Although Frank's feelings may only appear through the form of hate, we sometimes notice that deep down he feels love for his family, and he sometimes reflects about his bad parenting choices. But these moments are extremely brief, and they only last to the next chance of getting his hands on some money or on a welfare check. Frank is portrayed by William Macy, which in my opinion is one of the best actors on the show, perfectly conveying Frank's disgusting plans, his attitude towards life, his addiction, but also his extremely brainy side, which annoyingly manages to get him out of even the most sticky situations. But as I always say, if you arrive to the point of hating a character, then the actor portraying this character has done an excellent job. Frank has a wife, Monica, which has an equal amount of issues to deal with. Unfortunately, she left the Gallagher family when the kids were still extremely young, and although she seems to feel a strong love towards them, she actually has never made one step in order to provide anything as a mother. Frank and Monica's irresponsible behaviour left their eldest, although still young, daughter Fiona to care for her smaller siblings. Fiona loves these kids more than anything in her life and often has to come to terms with justice as Frank is legally still their legal guardian. She provides for most of the household's income. She makes sure that all of the kids get to have 3 square meals a day, and she tries as much as she can to keep them out of trouble, as unfortunately they live in an area of Chicago in which there is an abundance of criminal activity. Although Fiona may appear as a responsible woman, she is still very young and often makes hasty decisions which then have implications for the rest of the family. She also has countless brief relationships with people which provide nothing for her or the family, or seem to, but then deep down have unpleasant secrets hidden. The second eldest son is Philip, Lip. Lip is extremely intelligent, studious, and often appears as the most calm and responsible member of the family. As I often say, where you are born doesn't define you as a person, and often Lip's friends and relatives say that he was never meant to stay in the south side of Chicago, but unfortunately he is heavily influenced by his surroundings and is often tempted by the easier way of getting around problems. This attitude often gets him into trouble, which he then justifies with the fact that they are Gallaghers. Then we have Ian. Ian is an extremely particular character, as he isn't as outspoken and loud as the rest of the family, preferring to meditate and solve his own problems in silence. And later in the series we have an even deeper insight into his mind. On the contrary of Lip though, he doesn't seem to be so affected by the criminal activity around him, and he tends to mostly stay out of trouble. Ian's sexual orientation is the proof that although the members of the Gallagher family haven't received a higher education, they are extremely mature and understanding. Ian is a homosexual, and nobody has ever criticised or even spoken much about his sexual orientation, proving that there's actually nothing to criticise or speak about because it is just perfectly normal. The mature acceptance of other people's choices is actually a recurring feature in Shameless, again proving that education or your own social background does not define you as a person. And this again underlines why Shameless is such an interesting TV series. Frank and Monica also have a daughter, Debbie. Debbie is a teenager with premature motherly feelings, so she's always happy to look after her smaller brother and often worries about her family's issues, including her father Frank's situation. As a matter of fact, Debbie often appears to be the only person of the family that cares about her father Frank, and this feature is often present throughout the series as Frank starts to realise what Debbie has always done for him. Although Debbie might appear as a sweet and innocent girl, she doesn't hesitate in viciously defending her family and also proves to be extremely cunning. Carl is another of the younger siblings, therefore he is constantly exposed to his elder relatives' debatable life choices. As a matter of fact, at a very young age, he is already using offensive language, trying to get his hands on weapons and showing signs of violence towards his schoolmates. This behaviour slowly shifts into a thug life attitude, discarding school and healthy life choices. The smallest sibling is Liam, an extremely quiet child which unfortunately has to suffer the neglect, poor education and bad role models his family sets for him. All the children have a history of being shuffled from one foster family to another. The Gallagher name is well known around the neighbourhood. Social workers have extensively tried to work on the family's issues, but wherever you go in Chicago, the name Gallagher immediately rings a warning bell, and the kids seem to be doomed to a life with no choices. Luckily, they don't let their situation let them down, and they always fight for a better future. Other important characters in Shameless are Kev and Veronica, the Gallaghers' neighbours and best friends. The two families share nearly everything, including clothes, personal space and household items. Most of the other characters in Shameless, as I said before, are the Gallaghers' lovers, friends, co-workers and enemies. I have to admit that towards the middle end of the series, I found that the plot was starting to be filled of unengaging facts, maybe just to make the story continue. I would have preferred if that middle end section had continued like the first seasons, in which we really saw the development of the characters. We had deep insights into their mind. Luckily, the series then had a psychological peak at the end with the 7th season, in which a lot of different leads that had gone astray started to reunite. So Shameless sometimes is a comedy. We laugh at what the characters say, at Frank's absurd ways of making ends meet, but it also has a dark dramatic side which reminds us that we are laughing about issues that unfortunately many families are dealing with without cameras rolling, without maybe family unity and alternative choices for the future. Let me know if you saw Shameless with a comment here below, or let me know if you saw the original British series, and I'll see you soon in a new video. Bye!